They have lied to us, they have deceived us, and we have the documented evidence.
Did the witness congregation respond with compassion to this tragedy? Billy's sister, Rhonda.
When he died, it really devastated me. At his memorial service, none of his friends that he'd known all of his life were able to attend, and that really hurt me. The Jehovah's Witnesses claim to bring the families together. Through them, my brother killed himself. My mother tried to kill herself. My two sisters and my brother will not speak to me. My grandmother will not speak to me. She wouldn't let me see my grandfather before he passed away. They didn't bring our family close together. They nearly totally destroyed it.
While the members of the governing body may escape blame for the death of one desperate boy, they can hardly escape responsibility for their policies in the African country of Malawi. Policies that left thousands of witnesses raped, homeless, or dead.
In the mid-1960s, in the African country of Malawi, all citizens were ordered by the government to purchase a 25-cent party identification card. Jehovah's Witnesses were forbidden by the Watchtower Society's branch office from complying with that law. As a result, Jehovah's Witnesses suffered a terrible persecution. Homes and crops were burned, thousands of women were raped, and some 20,000 witnesses were forced to flee Malawi into neighboring countries to live in refugee camps, their lives scarred forever.
Now, Jehovah's Witnesses are taught that it's a sin to be involved in any way with politics. They're also taught that it's just as great a sin to have anything to do with the military. But we have two situations, one in a country in Africa, Malawi, and another in Mexico, where two opposite rulings were allowed to stay in effect at the same time, and it's almost unbelievable, the results of this.
When Jehovah's Witnesses living in Mexico heard that their brothers had suffered this terrible persecution over a 25-cent party card, they were conscience-stricken.
Because in Mexico, every young man is expected to fulfill 1 year of military service. He receives what's called a cartilla, a certificate. The witnesses customarily and regularly would bribe a military official to fill out this card, stating that they had completed their military instruction and that they were now in the first reserves of the Army. Why were they doing this? They gave me copies of letters from the Watchtower Society's headquarters in New York, stating that this was purely a matter for individual conscience, and that if the person felt he could do this, pay a bribe to a military official, get this card saying he had completed his military training and was now a member of the First Reserves, this was up to him.
Jehovah's Witnesses believe the men who make up the governing body are chosen and directed by God. Yet out of apparent indifference or ignorance or worse, the governing body allowed witnesses to illegally bribe officials, while at the same time holding others to a policy that resulted in their wholesale rape and slaughter. It's difficult for me to believe these actions were inspired by God.
The controlled tentacles of the governing body extend even into the life and death world of medical treatment.
In the 17th chapter of Leviticus, in the 10th verse, it states that one should not eat blood of any sort. This means that God does not want us to sustain our life off of the life of some other creature. And that for that reason, because God has forbidden it, we abstain from taking blood.
The blood issue in the back of our minds was bothering us because as Jehovah's Witnesses, if we freely gave a blood transfusion to our daughter, we'd be excommunicated, we'd be disfellowshipped. Well, the doctors finally came to our room and it was just like an ultimatum. They said, listen, we know from our records that you're a Jehovah's Witness. We know that you don't take blood transfusions. And the doctor looked me straight in the eye and said, Mr. and Mrs. Blizzard, you have to make a decision, yes or no, whether your child lives or dies. I remember going over to the bed and she had these cords and wires keeping her alive, life support systems. And and holding this limp child that was our only daughter, and just going over to the window and looking out and watching the clouds and the sky, and just started to weep. And I said, "Oh God, Jehovah," and I prayed to Jehovah.
We just had a real distinct impression that we were supposed to obey God's law and go by what we had always been taught, and that we were to let our daughter die. And so we just called the doctors back in and told them that we had just had to let her die, that we had to obey God's law.
About a half an hour later, a sheriff deputy came to our room and gave my wife and I both citations, and they told us that a court order has already been issued. Your daughter is going to get the blood, and they also warned the staff of the hospital not to allow us to take Jenny out of the hospital.
And we were charged with child neglect and abuse.
The witnesses, there was multitudes of them that came up to the room, just swarmed the room, tried to giving us watchtower articles about artificial blood, and you just can't let your child take that blood, and just putting this heavy guilt trip on us. The elders were relieved to find out that there was still time to get Jenny out of the hospital, and they would come up to me and say, "Hey, I've got a plan. We can get her. We can hire a helicopter. We can sneak her out of this hospital. Just unhook the tubes, and we're gone." And I said, "Wait a minute. You can't do that. It's against the law. I'll be charged with murder." They said, "That's a chance you're going to have to take." And I just told them, "Look, I just can't let my child die in that way." And the elders were just so upset. They left in a huff. They were mad. And one of the elders said on the way out, he looked me in the eye and said, "You know what? I hope your daughter gets hepatitis from that blood." And that was just the straw that broke the camel's back. I was just broken here. My own people, God's organization, turning against me, cursing me, because I just wanted to see my child live. And so they left. And we were all alone. Even my own parents didn't come see us.